The first time I realized how fragile power is, it wasn't during some boardroom meltdown or midnight system crash. It was at 2:37 a.m., alone in a humming office, when I caught the CEO's son-in-law approving a $240,000 consulting transfer to a company that didn't exist. I didn't say anything that night. I just stared at the glowing screen, listening to the low whir of the air conditioner and the rhythmic buzz of fluorescent lights, and quietly took a screenshot. Old habits die hard. See, I'm not one of those loud, performative geniuses who announce every contribution on LinkedIn. I'm the type who makes sure things work. Payroll, procurement, inventory. All the digital veins of this company ran through my hands. I built the automation systems, maintained the analytics backend, and patched the same outdated architecture the executives kept calling innovation. When something broke, I fixed it. When someone else broke it, I fixed it faster. And for 5 years, that's all I did, until he arrived. Marcus, the CEO's golden son-in-law. Fresh MBA, shiny watch, ego that could power half the building. His job title, Director of Digital Strategy, which in corporate translation meant make noise, take credit, and spend other people's time fixing your mistakes. The first thing he did was ask, "So, you're the IT lady?" I corrected him. "Head of Systems Architecture." He smirked. Cute. "Maybe someday you'll get a real title." That was the tone for the next 6 months. He strutted through hallways with buzzwords dripping from his mouth. Disruption, synergy, digital transformation, while I sat quietly behind a wall of monitors, keeping the company's fragile nervous system alive. Every time his flashy projects glitched, my team fixed it before he noticed. He called it teamwork. I called it cleaning his mess. I should have known it would explode eventually. It started small. The company began bleeding money from unexplained strategy consulting expenses. When I traced the payments, they looped through layers of dummy vendors, each registered under the same IP address. I had proof. But in corporate life, truth means nothing if it embarrasses family. So, I archived it quietly, just in case. A week later, I requested to enroll in a new cybersecurity certification, one designed to tighten internal audit trails. I submitted the cost breakdown, flagged it as mandatory compliance training. Approved automatically, as usual. 2 days later, Marcus stormed into my office. His shirt was too white, his smile too wide. "Linda," he said, tossing a printout of my expense report onto my desk. "You're stealing from the company." For a moment, I thought he was joking. Then I saw the email header, forwarded from his father-in-law, the CEO himself. I followed a course. I said slowly, "It's required to keep the company's system certifications active." He leaned closer, eyes sharp with something between arrogance and insecurity. "You don't decide what's required." "I do, and you're done here." I didn't flinch. Years of quiet survival in corporate trenches had trained me for this exact moment. The calm before the fire. "You're firing me?" "Effective immediately," he said, straightening his tie like it made him powerful. "Security's on the way." "Hand over your badge," I smiled. Not the kind of smile people give when they're defeated, but the quiet, deliberate one that says, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I took off my lanyard, placed the badge gently on his desk, and said, "You have exactly 10 minutes before your main system crashes." "Tell your father-in-law I said good luck." He laughed, that hollow, dismissive laugh people use when they don't understand what's about to hit them. Then he saw my eyes, and the laughter stopped. Because behind me, on the wall of screens, every dashboard flickered. Payroll, logistics, and internal compliance, all blinking amber. Warning signals he didn't even recognize. "You're bluffing," he said. "Am I?" I replied softly, packing my things. He didn't move. He didn't even call security. He just stood there, face pale, fingers frozen midair like he wanted to type something but didn't know where to begin. As I walked out, the office was unusually quiet. The kind of silence that happens right before a storm. Heavy, suspended, waiting. What Marcus didn't know was that the course he accused me of stealing wasn't just training. It was a certification granting full encryption authority over the company's infrastructure. A safeguard I'd installed 2 years earlier after a ransomware scare, one that required reauthorization every 6 months. By firing me, he hadn't just removed an employee. He had cut the only lifeline keeping the system stable. 10 minutes later, his world would start flickering. Invoices stuck in loops, vendor payments freezing mid-transfer, warehouses locking down automatically due to system integrity warnings. But I didn't need to see it. I'd already seen this pattern too many times before. Power built on ignorance always collapses. And Marcus? He'd just hit the button himself. As I stepped into the elevator, the lights dimmed for half a second. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Somewhere upstairs, Marcus was realizing that when you accuse the wrong person of theft, sometimes what you lose isn't money. It's everything holding your empire together. And that was just the beginning. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't have to swipe a badge to leave. It felt strange, liberating and hollow all at once. I had no plan, no next job lined up, no exit interview, no we'll stay in touch. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows betrayal. Outside, the morning air was sharp with the smell of rain and exhaust. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the building through the windshield. Inside those mirrored windows, hundreds of people were starting their workday, sipping coffee, scrolling through emails, completely unaware that in less than an hour, the systems they relied on were about to choke on their own arrogance. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply done my job. Too well, maybe. Everything in that company, from payroll to product logistics, was built on a fragile web of integrations I'd designed to be secure, transparent, and maintainable. If maintained properly. The keyword Marcus never understood. When he fired me, he invalidated my certification keys, the same keys tied to every internal encryption license. Without a certified administrator, the system couldn't reauthorize critical operations. It would start locking down automatically, piece by piece, like a nervous system losing connection to its brain. 10 minutes, I'd told him. That wasn't a threat. It was math. Still, I didn't want to see it unfold. I started the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove aimlessly through downtown. My phone buzzed twice, an automated ping from my off-site server. Key rotation detected. Root admin missing. Then a second message. Auto protection mode active. Translation. Atlas 9, the company's infrastructure backbone, was now sealing itself. By the time I stopped for coffee 15 minutes later, I could already imagine the scene unfolding back inside. Marcus would be standing in the control room pretending to know what he was looking at. He'd probably call IT support first. Brad, the junior tech who once asked me how to change an HDMI input. Brad would panic, of course, because every command he typed would come back with access denied. Missing root signature, Marcus would then call finance, asking why vendor payments weren't processing. They'd say the system froze mid-transaction. HR would report that the payroll batch hadn't generated. Logistics would say their route management dashboard just went blank. And somewhere, his phone would buzz with a message from his father-in-law, the CEO. What the hell did you do? I could picture it vividly. Marcus pacing, sweating through his designer shirt, snapping at people who didn't deserve it. He'd blame legacy code, then server latency, then me. Of course he'd blame me. By the time I finished my coffee, my stomach had settled into that odd calm that comes only after chaos. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I just wanted peace. A concept foreign to anyone who's ever been trapped inside a corporate machine that rewards noise over substance. For years, I'd watched people like Marcus rise while people like me kept things alive from the shadows. When systems ran smoothly, the execs congratulated themselves. When things broke, they needed a scapegoat. The quiet ones always made the best targets. I tossed my cup, started the car again, and headed home. My apartment was small. 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, walls lined with books and backup drives. The kind of place you live in when you spend most of your life inside systems instead of sunlight. My laptop blinked awake the second I opened it. The dashboard lit up, displaying system status updates. Atlas 9 integrity check? Critical. Backup environment? Safe. I watched the graphs drop, not with satisfaction, but inevitability. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. At 10:03 a.m., my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then again. Then a message popped up. Marcus. What did you do? I typed one line back. You fired the wrong person. No reply. 2 minutes later, another notification arrived. Not from him this time, but from one of my old team members, Clara. She was sharp, honest, the only one who ever thanked me for staying late. Linda, what's happening? Systems are going down everywhere. They said you're gone. I hesitated, then replied, tell them to check the license ledger. The expiration date. It's not sabotage. It's compliance, a pause. Then, so, it's true? They really fired you? Yeah. Then we're screwed. I stared at the message for a while before setting the phone aside. It wasn't my problem anymore. I'd built safety nets, backups, even documentation that Marcus never bothered to read. I'd done everything right, except protect myself from people who didn't value competence. By 10:47 a.m., social media was buzzing. Employees were tweeting about internal outages and data loss. A post appeared on LinkedIn. Westline Corp experiences unexpected system failure. Operations halted. The news spread fast. Investors panicked. I refreshed the feed once more before closing the laptop. The thing about systems, digital or human, is that they collapse the same way. Slowly, then all at once. And as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, all I felt was tired. I looked around my apartment. The quiet hum of the fridge, the pale light filtering through blinds. This was peace. The kind that didn't need applause or validation. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because people like Marcus don't just fall quietly. They scramble. They look for someone to blame, to fix what they broke. And when his father-in-law realized the extent of the damage, the frozen accounts, the halted deliveries, the missing authorizations, he wouldn't be asking what happened. He'd be asking one question only. Where's Linda? By the next morning, my inbox looked like a siren. 47 new messages. Half from old coworkers, half from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't open any of them. I already knew what they said. Some version of, please come back, or what the hell did you do? I made coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like burnt paper, and watched the morning news in the background. By 8:15, the story had broken. Westline Corporation reports a critical system failure. Payroll, logistics, and client operations halted due to an internal technical error. Technical error. That phrase made me laugh. Marcus must have written the statement himself. I muted the TV and opened my laptop. My off-site monitor showed what I expected. The company's main framework, Atlas 9, was in quarantine mode. It hadn't crashed. It had locked itself exactly as designed. Without valid administrator credentials, every automation module, every vendor connection, every payment portal was frozen in self-protection. Marcus had fired the only certified operator. The system wasn't broken. It was simply waiting for someone who no longer existed in its world. At 8:32, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Linda, it's Clara. Her voice was low, tense. They're panicking upstairs. Marcus is losing it. I rubbed my temple. How bad? Payroll's offline. Vendor contracts are stuck in draft status, and the CEO's assistant said Marcus hasn't left his office since last night. He keeps saying he can fix it. Of course he does. Arrogance always outlives logic. Listen, Clara whispered. I shouldn't be calling you, but is there any way to unlock Atlas? There is, I said quietly. But they'd need to contact the certification board and file an emergency request. It'll take days, maybe weeks. She sighed, the kind of sigh that carries exhaustion and disbelief in equal measure. He's not telling the CEO that part. He's saying it's just a glitch. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. By noon, a second article appeared online. Internal sources claim Westline's digital operations were tied to a single architect who was recently terminated. Someone had talked. Maybe finance, maybe logistics. It didn't matter. The story was out. And with it, the cracks in Marcus's shiny reputation were starting to show. I imagined the CEO, Richard Wallace, pacing in his glass office, veins tightening around his temples as he connected the dots. He wasn't stupid. Ruthless, yes, but not stupid. He'd built Westline from a small manufacturing firm into a multi-million-dollar distribution empire. He knew the difference between bad code and bad leadership. And right now, he was realizing that his son-in-law had fired the one person keeping his company functional. At 2:04 p.m., a black SUV parked outside my apartment. I saw it from the window. Tinted windows, corporate plates. A minute later, a knock. Firm, official. I opened the door halfway. It wasn't HR or security. It was Richard himself. "Linda," he said, voice even but strained. "We need to talk." He looked different up close. Older, heavier, the confidence dulled by sleeplessness. His tie was crooked, his eyes rimmed red. "Surprised you know where I live," I said. "I checked the HR records before the system went dark," he replied. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in, glancing around my small apartment like he couldn't process how the person who built his empire's digital spine lived so modestly. He didn't sit right away. He just stood there, studying me. "I need to ask," he said finally. "Did you do this intentionally?" "No," I said. "You did." He frowned. "Excuse me?" "You let someone with no technical background fire the only certified administrator connected to a system built around compliance locks. The system's doing what it's supposed to, protecting itself." He sighed and sank into the armchair across from me. I trusted him. "Marcus said you were misusing company funds." "He didn't understand the expense reports," I replied. "Those funds were federal-grade licenses. Without them, your automation pipeline doesn't even meet audit standards." Richard rubbed his forehead. "How long until everything stops completely?" "Some of it already has," I said. "The rest will go into idle mode within 48 hours. Silence filled the room. Only the faint hum of my laptop fan broke it. Then he said quietly, "Can you fix it?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who'd ignored me for years, who'd walked past me in hallways without learning my last name, who only noticed my existence when it threatened his bottom line. "I could," I said, "but I won't." His eyes snapped up. "You're angry?" "I get that, but people's jobs are on the line." "People's jobs were always on the line," I interrupted. "I stayed late every night making sure no one missed a paycheck because your golden son-in-law rerouted budget approvals through a sandbox account. I protected this company from his mistakes, and you let him call me a thief." Richard exhaled slowly, like a man finally understanding the cost of arrogance. "I can pay you." "It's not about money," I said. "It's about respect. You built a company that rewards noise over skill. You let a man who can't read a system log decide who's valuable." He stared at the floor. "So that's it?" "That's it." He stood, adjusted his tie, and nodded once. "You're a remarkable woman, Linda." "I wish I'd realized it sooner." "Most people do," I said softly. He left without another word. The SUV door shut, engine humming low as it pulled away. That night, I sat by the window watching city lights flicker like dying servers. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Clara. "CEO just walked out of a board meeting. They're saying the losses could hit 7 figures. Marcus disappeared." I read it twice, then turned the phone face down. The truth was, I didn't take joy in their downfall. I just couldn't save people who refused to see the fire until they were standing in the smoke. Sometimes collapse isn't destruction, it's correction. And Westline was finally correcting itself. The following Monday started like any other. Gray skies, cold coffee, inbox full of noise. But this time, I wasn't the one holding the system together. I was watching it unravel from a distance. At 7:15 a.m., a notification popped up on one of my private dashboards. I'd left it active, not for revenge, but because part of me couldn't look away. Old habits die slow. The alert said, Atlas 9, emergency mode initiated, primary operations halted. Translation? The company was in free fall. A few minutes later, a message from Clara appeared. They brought in outside consultants. 3 firms. Nobody can get access. Every portal requires your biometric key. Marcus hasn't been seen since Friday. I read it twice. Trying to feel something. Guilt, satisfaction, regret. Nothing came. Just a steady, quiet calm. The kind that comes after surviving a storm you didn't start. Still, I opened a live feed of Westline's internal network status. Most of the servers were flashing red, a few orange, and a handful gray. Shut down by choice, I guessed, in a desperate attempt to isolate the damage. But there was no damage. Not really. The system wasn't broken. It was obeying. I'd designed it that way. The longer I looked, the more I realized how fragile everything had been all along. It didn't take sabotage to destroy a company. Just ignorance and arrogance in the same room. By mid-morning, my phone rang again. It wasn't Clara this time. The caller ID said unknown. Against my better judgment, I answered. Linda Taylor? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Thomas Grant from the board of Westline Corporation. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting arrangement. I smiled slightly. There it was, the inevitable call. I'm listening, I said. The situation is serious, he continued. We've lost access to nearly every operational system. Vendors are panicking. Payroll's frozen. Legal says we could face penalties if deliveries don't resume. We understand you were the system architect. I was, I corrected him. Past tense. He hesitated. We'd be willing to offer a substantial consulting fee for your immediate return, just until the system stabilizes. How substantial? 5 figures. I almost laughed. They were losing millions, and they were offering me what they'd pay a marketing intern for a month of work. Mr. Grant, I said evenly, what's happening right now isn't a crash. It's a security measure. Atlas 9 requires reauthorization through the same certified account that built it. That account no longer exists. He cleared his throat. So it can't be reversed? Not unless you restore the certification through proper channels, I said. It's federal-grade encryption. You can't just reboot it. He was silent for a long moment. Marcus said you threatened the company. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't threaten anyone. I warned him that afternoon the news got worse for them. A leaked memo hit social media, screenshots of Marcus's fake vendor accounts, his consulting transfers. The story exploded within hours. Hashtags, speculation, investors fleeing like rats from a burning ship. I didn't leak it, but I knew who did. Clara. She'd always had a quiet sense of justice. She didn't owe loyalty to men who built empires on lies. By evening, I watched the local business channel report it like a corporate autopsy. Westline's internal systems remain offline for the 4th day. Sources close to the board confirm an ongoing investigation into mismanagement and financial misconduct. They didn't name Marcus, but they didn't need to. His face was already plastered across every finance blog in the city. I thought about Richard, the CEO, sitting in his office surrounded by chaos, probably wondering how his empire fell apart so fast. He'd call it betrayal, maybe even sabotage. But the truth was simpler. He'd built a company that worshipped the wrong people. When I worked there, I saw it daily. How competence was ignored because it wasn't loud. How men like Marcus got promoted for confidence, not results. I was invisible until they needed a scapegoat. And now, Invisibility was my armor. Around 9 p.m., I got one last message from Clara. They're shutting the office tomorrow. CEO resigned. Marcus is under investigation. They're asking if I can reach you. I typed a reply, then deleted it. What could I say? That I was sorry? That I'd warned them? That sometimes justice looks like silence? Instead, I sent, "Take care of yourself, Clara. You deserve better than that place." Then I turned off my phone. Outside, the city was quiet. The streetlights reflected off wet pavement, and in the distance, thunder rolled low and steady. For the first time in years, I felt light, untethered from the constant hum of responsibility. I thought about everything that had happened, the years of unseen work, the long nights patching code no one thanked me for, the constant underestimation. And I realized something simple but profound. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd just stopped saving people who refused to save themselves. The next morning, I opened my laptop to a blank document and typed 3 words at the top. New Beginnings Protocol. It wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. I was going to build something new. Something transparent, fair, and functional. A system where integrity couldn't be overwritten by ego. Westline was collapsing. Yes. But sometimes a system has to fall apart before something stronger can replace it. And maybe that's what I'd been waiting for all along. 3 weeks after Westline collapsed, I got another call. This time from a number I didn't recognize, though something about the area code felt familiar. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Linda Taylor?" a calm voice said. "This is Robert Ames. I used to handle operations at Norvale Industries. We've been following what happened at Westline. I stayed quiet. These kinds of calls had become common lately. Companies sniffing around, trying to see if the woman who brought a giant to its knees would do the same for them." He continued, "We're not calling to offer a position. We're building something new. Something better. We'd like you to lead the architecture." I smiled faintly. "You do realize my name isn't exactly investor-friendly right now?" "That's exactly why we want you," he said. "You built a system that couldn't be corrupted." "That's rare. We want that kind of backbone here." It was tempting, not because of the money, but because of the promise in his tone. Integrity, something Westline never had. "I'll think about it," I said, then hung up. But as I set the phone down, I realized I already had my answer. I didn't want to go back to fixing someone else's mess. I wanted to build something that couldn't be broken by arrogance again. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the one that had become my silent witness through every sleepless night and crisis, and opened a clean document on my laptop. I named it Aurora, a project I'd been sketching for years. A system that would make corporate structures transparent, traceable, and human-proof. No hidden transfers, no ghost approvals. Every action logged, every permission earned. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reform. As I wrote, I thought about Marcus, still missing from the public eye. Rumor had it he'd fled the city after his accounts were frozen. Investigators found trails of falsified invoices and consulting contracts under his signature. It was only a matter of time before they caught up. Richard, on the other hand, had resigned. The last article I read said he'd sold his remaining shares and moved to the coast. The company that once boasted of digital transformation leadership had filed for bankruptcy protection, and Clara, she'd landed on her feet. Another firm had hired her almost immediately after the shutdown. She messaged me once, just a short note. "It's different here. They actually listen. You were right all along." I smiled at that message more than I'd expected to. It was proof that not everything good gets buried under bad leadership. Some people notice. Some people remember. A few days later, I received an email from a journalist. The subject line read, "Interview request. The woman behind Atlas 9. The message was polite, curious. They wanted to clarify misconceptions and tell my side of the story. For a moment, I considered it. Maybe it was time to clear my name, to let people know that I hadn't taken revenge. I'd simply stopped enabling incompetence. But then I closed the email and deleted it. People like Marcus and Richard built their empires on attention. I wasn't going to rebuild mine on the same foundation. Instead, I poured everything into Aurora. Long nights, silent mornings, code that felt like therapy. The difference this time was that I wasn't building it for anyone. I was building it because of everything that happened. By the second week, I had a working prototype. It wasn't flashy, but it was strong. Encrypted with independent key layers, self-auditing, and completely owner-neutral. It couldn't be hijacked by management or disabled by one person's ego. And in the corner of the dashboard, I wrote a line of code that appeared every time the system booted. Integrity is not optional. That was my quiet rebellion. One evening around midnight, I got another email. This one from Richard. It was short, hesitant, written like a man who'd spent too long rehearsing the words. Linda, I owe you an apology. I should have listened. We lost everything, and it was our own doing. I know you don't owe me anything, but if you ever decide to build something new, I hope it's not too late for people like me to learn from it. I read it twice before closing my laptop. It didn't make me angry or smug. It just made me sad. For him, for the people who'd worked under him, for how many good employees had been crushed under a system that rewarded all the wrong things. But it also reaffirmed something. Sometimes people only learn when the walls fall down. A month later, I met with Robert Ames and his small team. Not in a boardroom, not in some shiny tower, but in a co-working space with mismatched chairs and real conversation. They wanted to fund Aurora. Not own it, not rebrand it, just help it grow. So I said yes. Not for revenge, not for redemption, but because I finally understood what power really was. Not control, not money, not titles. It was the ability to walk away and start over, and still be whole. As I left that meeting, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. I stopped, looked up, and felt the warmth on my face. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of systems built by others. Now I was building one of my own. And this time, it wouldn't need saving.